We have an incredible speaker with us tonight who will challenge us to reach into the inner depths of our heart. She was raised in Washington and went to the University of Nevada, Reno, where she played volleyball with a scholarship. Along with her apostolic life in SOLT, she has an incredible podcast called Abiding Together. Tonight, she will help us answer the question, who am I? And help us realize that the things of this world might not satisfy the deepest longings of our hearts. Coming to us from the great state of Texas, please help me welcome Sister Miriam James.
Hi, friends. I am delighted to be here with you. It's a way different than I'd hoped, but here we are, and I have been praying for you and thinking of you for a long time. And just today, before I came here to film this, I just was kneeling in our chapel before the Blessed Sacrament and just asking Jesus to bless you, asking him to open your heart and asking him to speak to the deepest places wherever you find yourself. And we probably found ourselves in a lot of different places this last year. I don't know about you, but I have been in the countryside, in the remote locations of the great nation of Texas for a long time and asking the Lord a lot of questions. And I was really looking forward to getting together with you in January, all of us with tens of thousands of our closest friends and worshiping the Lord together and understanding that in all things, the Lord is sovereign. And here we are. And I think today, I have some simple thoughts for you and really a reflection from my own heart. And what you're about to hear today is not something that I have constructed really carefully. It's really an offering, an outpouring of my heart and what the Lord has been doing and his heart for you. And some time ago, I was traveling to just north of where I live in Austin, a few hours north. And I was on my way to the art museum because I love the art museum. And it was the middle of November. And in Texas, it's very common for it to be 80, 85 degrees in the middle of November. And I was going to the art museum in the morning, mid-morning, and I was starting to pull up to the stoplight. The art museum is at the University of Texas, and so I was close to downtown and pulling up close. And as I pulled up to the stoplights, I began to see tents under overpasses where people were living, homeless people were living. And it just kind of caught my eye in a new way. And we see that a lot of times, especially obviously in big cities, but obviously in cities where it's warm. So there's a large homeless population and a lot of times in warm cities. And it just so happened that I pulled up to a stoplight, and out of my left side, this young man caught my eye. And he was wearing white athletic socks, and he had cargo shorts on, and he had a t-shirt, and he had his blonde hair piled in a bun. And I just was captivated by him for a moment, and I was just watching him. What really caught my attention about him was that he was folding his blankets, and he was shaking them out, and he would fold them very, very particularly. And I saw that he had one already nicely folded on a shopping cart, but he would shake it out and he would shake it out and he would fold it again. And it wasn't right. And he would shake it out and just the way he did it very meticulously. I was thinking to myself, I bet his mama taught him that. Because that's something so particular that only somebody who would teach you would know something that particular. And finally, he got his blanket the way he wanted it and he folded it very carefully and he laid it over the shopping cart. And in an instant, if I could have talked to him, I was just captivated by him. And I wanted to ask him, like, man, how'd you get here? How did you get here? I doubt when he was an 8-year-old boy that living under an overpass in downtown Austin, Texas was the goal of his life. And I was thinking to myself, how'd you get here? Is this an upgrade from what home life would have been? Are you close to home? Are your mom and dad looking for you? Is this something, do you have an addiction? Like, what's happening in your life? And my heart obviously you can tell even now, this is months later, I still think of him. And then the light turned green and I went on my way to the art museum. But that young man, he just found a place in my heart. And I think that's a great question when we kind of start this conference together of, how did you get here? How did you get here? And, we're talking about mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, as a man and as a woman. Like, how did you get here? And I think so often in life, we end up places and we have no idea how we got there. I mean, perhaps you drove wherever you are today. Have you ever driven somewhere and you got in the car because you put the keys in the car and you ended up where you're supposed to because you're there right now, but you're like, I have no idea how I got here. Like, I have no idea. Because you were thinking about something else. And I mean, because it's actually a different part of your brain that governs that kind of repetitive emotion, right? But we have these ideas. We don't understand how we get there. Or maybe you have been in a heated argument with somebody and you're looking at that person and in your mind, you're like, how did we get here? How did it come to this? Or you've been captured by something so beautiful in life, like a beautiful sunset or somebody that you love deeply, or a beautiful symphonic melody as it just washes over you and your soul, and you just say to yourself, man, how did I get here? This is so glorious. And I think these are the things we should ask ourselves. These are the things because they're speaking to a deeper root, a deeper question that you and I have every single day, which piggybacks on that, which is a deeper question that says, who am I? Who am I? What am I doing here? What's happening in life? And it's really beautiful because, see, Christ is not afraid of these deep questions. As a matter of fact, he welcomes them. And he's such a great teacher because what he does is he actually teaches by asking questions. He elicits the answers from us, perhaps even when we don't know what they are ourselves. And it's really great because in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verses 18 to 20, we find it's also in Matthew and Mark. But I love the particular version of Luke. What Luke shows us is because it says, and this is after he's fed the 5,000, he's performed the miracle. So he's becoming very well known. And people are hearing about Christ, and the disciples are hearing what people are hearing about Christ. They're hearing what people say about him. And just like you and just like me in life, we have all kinds of opinions, don't we? And it's so great because Jesus is alone. It says he was alone in prayer with the Lord, with the Father, right? He's alone in prayer, and the disciples were with him. And it's from this relationship with the Father that Jesus turns to his disciples and he says to them, who do people say that I am? Who do people say that I am? A great question. And it's great because the disciples have a lot of answers because they're hearing what people are saying. Like all of us have ideas and all of us have other people in our life who have opinions of us. And they say, some people say you're John the Baptist, others Elijah, or some of the prophets that have risen again. And I can just imagine Christ looking at them like he looks at you and I. And then he brings the question much closer to home. And then he says to them, but who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And that question is really, what we're going to do is we're going to ask Jesus the inverse here in a second. But that question reveals everything on our heart. It reveals who Christ is, what our goals are, what our priorities are, what life is about, what breaks our hearts, what captivates us, what challenges us, what sets us on fire. And in society today, as we see in so many ways, society is totally melting down in so many different ways. This question that Christ asks us, who do you say that I am? And that we will inversely ask him, Jesus, who do you say that I am? Is the foundation of the direction of our lives. And we know that Peter will say, well, you're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. And Christ will speak to him about that. But I just want to ask you, have you ever thought about that? When Jesus says to you, like, who do you say that I am? And when I ask you that question, I'm not talking just from an intellectual level. That's very important. But there's something about an answer that comes from deep within. Because I think we have a variety of answers. And all of us in our life have Christ in certain places in our life, and we have certain ideas about Christ and who he is. And it's only when we find him, when we continue to turn our face to him, that we find out not just who he is, but who we are. Who we are. And we ask ourselves that question as we begin, like we were saying, who am I? Who am I? And I think I myself have looked in the mirror at, various times and just kind of look at myself in the mirror. I'm 44 years old now, and I'm looking in the mirror going, how did this happen? I have no idea. I still feel like I'm 28, but here I am 44 years old. I'm looking in the mirror and saying to myself, saying to the Lord, like, who am I? What does this even mean? What does it mean to be human? And just in the journey of what God is doing in my life, like, what does it matter? What does suffering matter? What does joy matter? What is the Lord doing? And he continually responds to me is the same way he responds to you. And he kept saying to me, look at my face. You look at my face and you'll find out who you are. Because you're made in Jesus says, you're made in my image and likeness. And we know that from Genesis, where God makes man and woman in his image and likeness. We bear his imprint. It's such a glorious thing that we're made to know and to love. We have an intellect and a will. We can perceive what is good and to choose what is good and to travel along that path, that our emotions power us ideally when they're healed to what is good, true, and beautiful, to our deepest desires. To the deepest questions, it reveals the deepest questions that we have. And the Lord continues to do so. This summer I was very blessed to be on a Zoom call. Zoom is, we all have different relationships with Zoom. I feel like it's the Muppet Show most of the time, but I was at this privilege to be on the Zoom call with Father Jacques Philippe, and it was myself and 200 diocesan vocation directors, priests who were diocesan vocation directors, and I'm a huge Father Jacques Philippe fan. And I've never heard him speak in public, and it was just really wonderful because as he was speaking in French, and then one of the priests was interpreting, in real time what Father Jacques Philippe was saying. And his talk was about fatherhood. It was a talk to the priest about their fatherhood and about receiving sonship. But Father Jacques Philippe said something that I've thought of almost every single day since he said it. And he said this. He says, modern man is condemned to success because without God, he has no place to take his failures. Modern man is condemned to success because without God, he has no place to take his failures. Do you have places in your life where you feel like you're condemned to success, that you better succeed at all cost? You better hide that part of your heart. You better not tell that story. Or you better perform really well, because if you don't, there's this massive wound of feeling unloved, where we feel like I just have to, if I can just manage my life well, if I can just do this thing well, if I can just figure it all out, then somehow I'll be lovable. Somehow God will love me more. But the answer is underneath. Because Father Jacques Philippe went on to say that it's the Father, it is God who welcomes you and I. It's his heart where you and I have a seat at the table. It's his heart where you and I can go to God with anything. With anything. And he's not afraid. He's not disgusted. He's not disinterested. It's just the way he loves. He welcomes you and I. He welcomes you and I. And he delights to answer that question that you and I have in various forms every single day of who am I? How did I get here? Because we're asking that question constantly. I can guarantee you, in a way, probably a covert way, you've already asked the question of who am I to your social media accounts today. You've asked that question to the people in your house. You've asked that question to your job. You've asked that question to your parishioners. You've asked that, whatever that is. We all take that question all the time, and we offer it to other people. And because everybody has a different experience of us and a different experience of their own lives, they all have various answers, and none of them are complete. And thank God for it. Thank God for it. Because anybody that loves us authentically can reveal just one part of God's love for us. But it is only God himself who sees us according to the whole, who sees us fully. He doesn't look at us according to our defense mechanisms, our self-defense mechanisms, or our sin or our addiction. I know I'm a recovering addict myself. All the places in our hearts that we fought for a long time to hide, all the places we're embarrassed about. He's not off-put by our defensiveness, by our self-righteousness. He just sees through it. He sees through it, and he loves us there. And he says to you and I over and over and over and over and over again, you are mine. And you belong to me. You belong to me. That you love, as you watch this, every single one of you, you love in a way that nobody else loves. That you love God in a way that's just particular to you. That you love other people in a way that's just particular to you. It's a glorious masterpiece of creation that is you. And the Lord sees you. And he calls you. And he loves you. And his heart is for you. I think one of the best pieces of news we can ever possibly receive is that you and I are not condemned to success. And as St. John Paul II said many years ago, that we are not a summation of our failures or our sins. We are a sum of the Father's love for us and our real capacity to become like his Son. That is who we are. And you know it, and I know it. And as we're sitting here today, you might find certain things as you're listening, that things that are really piercing you, and you might find some things that are bouncing off your heart. You might find some things that you're saying, well, that's good for you, sister, because you're a nun. You're supposed to say things like that. It's interesting, even in our own hearts, of how we have our own opinions of ourselves. And yet the Lord just comes, and he just comes in his tender kindness. Because see, the Lord has never forgotten who he is. We forget. You and I forget at times. Or sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes you and I in life have been told a different story. And those areas, those things that have been spoken over us, especially the things that have been incredibly painful, those lie deep within our heart. And many times we default to those points of view, and people ask us who we are, and we talk about our job, or we talk about our, what we do for a living, or we talk about our education, or we talk about. And Jesus keeps coming to us, and he says, who do you say that I am? And so you and I come to him today at the very beginning, and we just say to him, Jesus, who do you say that I am? I had a friend of mine in a homily recently, and he said, when we sin, it's so wonderful. It's just great. His quote, he said, when we sin, it's because we've forgotten we belong. We've forgotten. So I've forgotten that I made an image and likeness of God. I've forgotten I'm a beloved daughter. I've forgotten that I belong to the Lord. I've forgotten that his heart is for me, that he will fulfill every desire of my heart. I just forget. So I just turn away, like back to Egypt, and I kind of do my own thing. And it never works. And I know it's never going to work. And I get frustrated. I get frustrated with myself at times. But the Lord doesn't, just in his kindness. Because as Father Jacques Philippe was saying, that everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody has a place in this warm, tender love of God, the tenderness of God, where he comes to welcome us, and he comes to reveal the truth to us. So as we begin, and we kind of think about, how did you get here? How did you get here mentally, right? Where did you come from? How did you get here emotionally? Even as you sit here today and listen to this, whether you're driving or going for a walk, what do you find? What's stirring in your heart? How did you get here physically? How did you get here spiritually? How did you get here in your masculinity as a man and your femininity as a woman? What is that story? Because it's a glorious story being told. And the Lord desires to take all of it into himself, to unite it to his heart, and to give us the gift of himself so you and I know who we are. When we forget who we are, we're easily led astray. We easily fall into cancel culture and kind of outrage, all this kind of stuff that's happening. But in our heart, I don't believe for a second that's what we really want. I don't believe for a second. Even as you watch this today, and whatever you find yourself, and you're saying to yourself, sister, there's a secret I could never tell, or I can't admit to this, or I have deep desires in my heart that I'm afraid to utter, or I've hoped for something and it hasn't come true. You don't understand. And it's true, as a person, sometimes we don't quite get each other, but in my own way, I do. And the one who does completely and fully is the one who sees you, the one who knows you, and the one who wants to answer that question of, who am I? Who am I? So if that's okay with you, just as we kind of dive into this, I wonder if I could just pray with you just for a few minutes and just kind of give you space just in your heart to kind of open your heart here and just to see what the Lord might want to say. So I'm just going to ask if you want to just kind of settle in wherever you are and just take a deep breath, just all the way in and all the way out. Let's just take another deep breath in, all the way in and all the way out. And Jesus, I pray right now that for each one of us, you would open our hearts wherever we find ourselves. I pray that your attentive, kind, tender love would just melt any areas of resistance. And Jesus, I just ask that you would open our hearts. I just want to invite you, my friends, just to picture Christ in front of you, however he reveals himself to you. Just to notice what that's like in your heart. And I just want to invite you just to ask him, maybe for the first time or maybe for the 1,000th time, Jesus, who do you say that I am? Who am I? I just ask you, Jesus, that you would speak to each one of us right now. What do you want us to know about your love for us and who we are in your sight? And Jesus, I pray in a new way that our hearts would be open. I pray for grace, for hope, for freedom, for receptivity in our hearts. I pray that your tender healing love would come upon us right now. We surrender our hearts to you. We surrender this conference to you. We surrender every moment to you. We pray to encounter you, Lord, so that we know who you are and who we are, and we can live in the power of your love accordingly. We just thank you, Jesus. And I know the Lord is going to do deep things during these days. And I say we go for it. Let's let the Lord speak to us. Let's let the Lord answer these questions to unfold our hearts, to set us free so that we live as he's calling us to live and who we were meant to be, deeply seen by the one who loves us for all eternity. So here we go. God bless you.